Joined us, and there is nothing more beautiful than what we have right here in Northwest Florida. Andrew, to paint a picture for all those who are listening this morning, we're looking out over the gorgeous Gulf of Mexico, gorgeous beach here at Pensacola Beach, and I want to thank those who've chosen to come out and share their ideas, concerns, criticism. This is our kickoff to Pensacola Open Gaetz Day, and later today we'll be spending time at some of our local schools. We'll be visiting some different community partners. I'll be giving a briefing to the Escambia County Commission, and we'll end it tonight with a little fun at the Blue Wahoos game. And so we're going to take questions from our live audience here. We're going to take questions on the air from our listeners. Andrew, what number should folks call if they've got a question and they want to ask it?
437-1620, 437-1620. They can text to that number as well. Either way you want to participate, we can get your questions in for Representative Gaetz.
Excellent. And we have given out raffle tickets to those who are live and in attendance here. And so if you've got raffle ticket number 557, we'd love to get your question. 557. All right, ma'am, you're up. Come step right up to the microphone. You are live on the air at 1620, and I'm Congressman Matt Gaetz, and I'm grateful that you take the time to come out this morning and chat with us. What's your question, comment, or concern?
I'm wondering about the EPA and why if somebody wants to go dissolve the entire thing, because it's very important to the nature of what we have around here. It has so many oversight committees that are involved with the environment, and if you lose the environment, the country goes down, because we need good crops, we need animals that are being monitored to see if you have dissolving herds or disease or whatever else, and the Environmental Protection Agency does that. And if you lose that, you're going to lose a lot that is of help to farmers and everybody else, the entire nation. So is there a possibility that that could be dissolved, that motion to get rid of it?
Well, here's what thank you for being here. Let me start by saying this. I certainly agree that environmental protection is a critical function of the government and a critical priority. Here's where we may disagree. The fact that the EPA is any good at actually protecting the environment. That's not my conclusion. That's the conclusion of the Inspector General's office, who went and looked at the efficiency of the EPA. Now, the EPA currently spends $8 billion of taxpayer money. And I think it's reasonable to ask whether or not that's the most effective use of those funds, or whether or not there are other environmental protection strategies at different levels of government that could work. When the EPA was created in 1970, we didn't even have the internet. We didn't have the wide proliferation of testing technology. And so I would venture to guess that if all of us who are gathered here today and those listening on the radio were to start from scratch with a strategy to improve our environmental protection, and we were to design that system for the generations to come, we would likely design something very different in the year 2017 that we would have designed in the year 1970. Let me tell you about what we're going to do today so that I can become more informed. Later today, we're going to go visit an EPA Superfund site, the ACW site in Pensacola. And to let everyone here know, that site was designated as a Superfund 34 years ago. They've moved a little dirt around and they've built a fence and dug some wells, but at the end of the day, 34 years later, that is still a toxic site that is blighting the community that surrounds it. Compare that to the state brownfield program. We're also going to visit the site today of a state brownfield program, which is currently the site of the Nick's Boathouse restaurant. And there, with less money, in faster time, we were able to add millions of dollars to the tax rolls, create a soft waterfront for waterfowl and nesting and restoration, and we were able to do that without the federal government, but by having the utilization of a state program. So part of what we're doing today is ascertaining how to best use funds to protect the environment, but no one believes that environmental protection isn't a priority. The question is how to best fulfill that priority with some of the assets and resources that we have at our disposal.
I've got a caller here.
Sure.
He couldn't hang on, but I'll ask the question. Why don't you call a number, we'll get them to the mic, and I'll ask you while you're doing that.
Sounds great. The next number we'll have is 568. If you've got 568, you're the next number. And Andrew, go ahead with our caller that we've got on the line.
Listener Dale wants to know if you're familiar with the modernization of the Recreational Fishing Act of 2017. Graves of Louisiana, a bipartisan bill. He says, I know we've talked a lot about fishing and changing the way that works here in the Gulf with NOAA and everything else. Do you know this bill, and do you have a thought about how we can make fishing better for the Gulf Coast?
Well, great question. I appreciate Dale asking. And actually, we've got folks here live who were just chatting with me about the Graves legislation. And no better way to talk about fishing than in the shadow of the great pier we've got on Pensacola Beach. The Graves bill would return to the states a number of rights as it relates to the management of fisheries. And let me say this, I support state-based management of our fisheries. I do that because I think the federal government has largely screwed up the management of our fisheries. I think they've lost credibility. They've relied on bad science. I have concerns with the Graves legislation because of the way that it would allocate fish share among the states. Louisiana, for example, has a greater share of the biomass, the fish, because many of the snapper, when they spawn, they need that mud that you get off the coast of Louisiana for the biology to work. Meanwhile, in Florida, we have less of the biomass, but we have far more participation because we have more coastline and because we've done a lot more to promote recreational fishing. So I support the underlying concept of the Graves bill to return control of fisheries to the states, but I'm a little concerned that the methodology that Garrett Graves uses in his legislation would negatively, disproportionately affect Florida because we've got more coastline, because we've got more participation, and it might be more of a windfall to our neighbors, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And so I think that we've just got to take into account the enhanced participation we have in Florida, but I support the concept. Sir, you have the next question. Go ahead and state your name. Tell us where you're from.
Good morning, Congressman. My name's Johnny, and I have the trifecta of local, military, and healthcare.
Wonderful.
So your predecessor was proud of getting the VA clinic located here, and part of the reason it was located in Pensacola is because it's next to the Naval Hospital, so there was a great deal of synergy between them. However, your predecessor didn't take much action trying to save the ICU and other necessary functions of the Naval Hospital, thereby greatly decreasing the utility of having the VA clinic. My question to you, as the new incumbent, is what are you going to do to bring back the ICU and the other functions to the Naval Hospital and military medicine that greatly benefit not just our serving personnel, but also the veterans who use the VA clinic next to it?
Yeah, thank you very much. And let me say, you make a good point that we often look at these assets like they're only assets for our active duty personnel or only the assets of our veterans. We've been able to use both here in Northwest Florida. So I'll do everything possible to be able to ensure that we've got the full complement of services that we need in Northwest Florida. It's noteworthy that when we go make this case in Washington, that in the 1st Congressional District, we've got the greatest concentration of veterans anywhere in America. There's no other member of Congress that gets to brag more about their concentration of veterans than I do. And so I think that we've got to make that case. We've got to make sure that we have those assets. Now, one of the things that's very difficult to deal with is that we're under some serious budget constraints. And for too long, we have not prioritized the provision of health care to our veterans. That's been problematic, and so as a member of the Budget Committee, I'm going to fight to make sure that we have adequate funding across the board, and that if we raise that overall level of funding, my hope is that we're able to make the case that in Northwest Florida, we deserve our fair share given our concentration of veterans. I would expand perhaps my answer to also include many of the other challenges I'm hearing from veterans in dealing with the VA. Most folks I chat with are very pleased when they finally get care at our facilities from our providers here in Northwest Florida. The challenge is in the bureaucracy. I've got veterans calling my office telling me they're waiting for many months just to get a decision from the VA that should be ministerial, that should be easily acquired. And so, I think that there are several reforms that are absolutely necessary if we're really serious about veteran health care. The first is you've got to be able to fire people who aren't doing their job. And I'll give my predecessor, Jeff Miller, a great deal of credit. He moved legislation off of the floor of the United States House that would have allowed us to be able to fire people at the VA without having to go through some terribly cumbersome process. Unfortunately, the United States Senate did not take up that legislation. So I'm going to keep pursuing it. I'm going to keep making sure that we have accountability at the VA. And also to keep fighting for those folks who might not be getting a fair shake. So if there are folks listening on the radio, Andrew, that are having a challenge with the VA, I would encourage them to go to our website, gaetz.house.gov, and let us give our best effort to help them out. Thank you so much for your question, sir. Do we have another question on the line, Andrew?
We do, in fact. You want to call out a number and we'll get that set up?
Absolutely. Our next number will be number 553. I gotta shake these up.
Brian is on the line at 437-1620. Brian, you're live with Congressman Gaetz at Casino Beach. Go ahead, sir. Brian's question was, all the talk about the EPA overstepping its bounds. Is there a reason, or is there some way, I think the thrust of his question would be, is there a way to rein in the EPA without completely abolishing it? I know this isn't something you get asked an awful lot, but is there maybe some kind of a middle level approach that might be a better way to resolve the problem with the EPA rather than complete abolishment?
Yeah, so there are two theories for those who have concerns with the EPA. One is we can take this system that we designed in 1970 and we can try to change it and reform it and move it around the edges. I think, frankly, that's what you see from the Trump administration. I think that's what you see from Scott Pruitt. What I found after 7 years in government is that agencies can be very stubborn. They can be very difficult to turn or reposition or pivot to the modern era. And in the state of Florida, when we were having challenges with the Department of Community Affairs, we didn't choose to just reform it. Instead, we said, let's abolish the Department of Community Affairs, and let's think of how we would want to have our communities interacting with each other, interacting with the state, and ultimately serving the citizens for economic development goals. And we created the new agency, the Department of Economic Opportunity. What that did was it put government back on the side of the people, where government wasn't there to say no. We were working on a way to get to yes, which was both conducive for the environment and conducive to our broader economic development goals. So in my experience, having seen it actually happen in Florida, it's easier to start from scratch because then you're not burdened by some of the prejudices and some of the inculcative features of an agency that's been around since 1970 and that has spread its wings perhaps beyond its original focus. So again, I'm for either, Andrew. I would support, repositioning the EPA, but I think the bolder, more effective reform is to start from scratch. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here. And Andrew, just so you know, this is one of my constituents who is willing to follow me all the way to Ponce de Leon in Holmes County for our last Open Gates Day. Ma'am, I am so grateful to you. And you know what? You have now made it to both far ends of District 1 to attend Open Gates Days. If you attend a few more, we'll give you like a free toaster oven or something. So go ahead and ask your question or make your comment.
Hi, my question is about Donald Trump and his financial interests. He has a lot of interests here in the U.S. and in other countries, and we've seen undeniable evidence that the Trump campaign has maintained close ties to the Russian government and may be vulnerable to blackmail, but he's not taken the necessary steps to eliminate potential conflicts of interest, and that really concerns me. One way he could reassure Americans is by releasing his tax returns, yet he refuses to do so. Congress can act unilaterally without Trump's permission to release his returns. You've said that he should. This is a partisan issue. It's a matter of public trust, and I want to be able, to say that I trust my government. So, will you commit to supporting legislation, the Tax Transparency Act, to get Donald Trump to release his tax returns?
Thank you for your question. I would say that when it comes to the identification of conflicts of interest, a document that I believe is more instructive than the tax returns are financial disclosures, because they have to lay out your liabilities, they have to lay out your assets, your expenditures, and so my expectation is that if you're interested in the various assets and liabilities that Mr. Trump maintains, accessing those financial disclosures would be helpful. I do believe that the president ought to release his tax returns. I think that it is a standard that is withheld, that has withstood the test of time. Where perhaps we disagree is that I don't believe that the Congress has the power to unilaterally force any one American to release their tax returns, nor should we. I would worry about Congress singling out an individual and forcing them to do that. So I've called on the president to release his tax returns. I think that he should release his tax returns, but I will not vote to use the power of Congress to force him to do so. And I'll give you the last word.
Well, there's a precedent for this, for Congress to do this, in '74, they released President Nixon's taxes. So this isn't an issue that's been up before, and there is precedent for Congress to do this. So I think that you need to do that.
Thank you very much for your input. Thank you for being here. Andrew, do we have another question on the line?
Why don't we do this? Pick a number, and then we'll do a quick traffic report, and we'll get that person on the line.
All right, how about 565?
We got him on the air. Yeah.
While we're waiting for the person to come to the microphone, this is Congressman Matt Gaetz doing a live open Gaetz Town Hall at Casino Beach. There's still time for you to come out here. We are here until 7:30 this morning doing this live, and then there's a beach cleanup afterwards. We'll also take your phone calls at 437-1620. You can text us at that same number, 437-1620. Let's get a quick check of traffic on the 5 with Jenna Scott.
Still dense fog right now, resulting in low visibility. Use caution and keep your headlights on. Smooth traffic on Highway 29, north and southbound. Blue Engine Parkway looking good. And the main gate at NES Pensacola also flowing smoothly. At Summer Vista Assisted Living, each day is filled with smiles and laughter. It's a cruise ship atmosphere on land. SummerVista.com. If you do come across any other problems on the road, just give me a call on the traffic hotline, 2626111. I'll have your next traffic update at 6:55. I'm Jenna Scott, News Radio 1620 now on FM at 92.3.
We want to remind you that the broadcast today is brought to you in part by Apollo Water Technologies. It is a beautiful day for a town hall out here. It's a great reminder of the beauty that we get to enjoy every single day. Congressman Matt Gaetz, back to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Sir, state your name, where you're from, and ask your question or make your comment.
Hi, I'm Steve. I live right here on Pensacola Beach. Try getting a home loan with the financial statement. My question is regarding you may have had a pristine childhood and young adulthood, followed all the rules, stayed in the lines. I know I didn't. I tested authority at every opportunity, but I'm concerned today that we're having so many of our young children, many of them underprivileged, pushed into what's called a pipeline to prison because they're not getting the same treatment, the same tolerance that we receive. That bothers me greatly. I want to know your position on that.
Thank you for your question, and let me assure you, in my childhood and young adulthood, there were plenty of blemishes. And so, it's kind of like what we say at my church. We don't take any perfect people, and I'm certainly not a perfect person, and I would venture to guess most folks have probably had a time or two where they wish they could have used better judgment. I'm no exception to that. When it comes to young people, here's what I would encourage you if you're interested in criminal justice reform, particularly at the juvenile level. Right now in our state legislature, there is a real movement to stop what they call the criminalization of adolescents. And there's legislation currently pending that our representatives are taking votes on that would expand the use of civil citations rather than entering young people into the criminal justice system. This, I think, strikes a good balance between ensuring that there are consequences, but also making sure that a few kids who throw a few water balloons don't end up seeing their entire life negatively impacted by some elevated criminal charge. So in the Florida House and in the Florida Senate, they're working with law enforcement, state's attorneys, public defenders, and I think that there's broad bipartisan support for criminal justice reform for youth. I would take that a step further. When I served as criminal justice chairman in the Florida legislature, we saw circumstances where people were facing a 5-year mandatory minimum prison sentence for trafficking if they had as few as 6 pills in their possession that they should not have. So again, you had people with a substance abuse problem that absolutely needed to be dealt with, but 5 years mandatory minimum in state prison was both a bad use of tax dollars and was not helpful in a rehabilitative context. And so when I was chairman, we passed legislation to give judges more discretion to, on a case-by-case basis, make decisions in the criminal justice spectrum. So I think the state of Florida is moving in the right direction there. I think that at the federal level, we could see perhaps better use of prosecutorial discretion with federal mandatory minimums, because we've got to be able to decide in this country that there's a difference between people that we're truly afraid of, people that could do harm to children, to our communities, that could make our streets less safe, and people we're just mad at. And the folks we're mad at, let's get them more help. I think it'll be a better use of funds and also the more humanitarian thing to do. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
I like the federal government behind this.
Great. Well, as I've seen in many circumstances, the state of Florida really is a leading innovator in a lot of reforms, and I'm proud of our state legislature for showing the federal government how this can be done in a way that doesn't make our streets less safe, but that uses the criminal justice system in a far more efficient and effective way. Great, thank you. Andrew, I'm going to go ahead and read the next number, then we'll take a call from the line. How about 569, our next number?
So Maria, who is watching us on Facebook Live at News Radio 1620's Facebook page, Maria asks a question about funding for libraries and schools. She's very concerned about, I think, some of your positions regarding the Department of Education, but particularly wants to know whether you're committed to making sure that libraries and schools in general get the funding they need for our children.
Well, as it relates to the Federal Department of Education, my position is unequivocal. I support abolishing the Federal Department of Education. When I see the Federal Department of Education with their bloated bureaucracy, taking money that should be spent in schools on teachers just so that a bunch of bureaucrats can write up more tests and create more paperwork, I think it's shameful, and I think that it robs funds that are absolutely needed for our children. Now, as it relates to the funding for libraries, when I was in the state legislature, each and every year I fought in the budget process to make sure that our libraries received adequate funding. But I do not believe that library funding is a core function of the federal government. I believe that is a function of the state government. And frankly, when I look at a federal government that's $19 trillion in debt, that's poised for $28 trillion in debt if we don't make very significant budgetary reforms, I'm not willing to go and borrow money from China against the future of the next generation for library funding at the federal level when we've been able to adequately fund libraries at the state level, and I think that's the far more effective strategy. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here. Ask your question or comment.
Thanks. I noticed in your answers today that you seemed a little bit unclear about how the EPA works and the stuff that EPA does, and EPA is really uniquely positioned to do the research that's needed to protect environmental and public health. And I know that you've been invited now many times in person and through proper channels to come visit your own EPA research facility here just a mile down the road. And I wanted to know again if you would come see what we do, see the important work we do, get an idea of just how much we bring to this area. I think a lot of your colleagues would be really happy to have that facility in their district. I think you are uniquely privileged for that. So again, I want to see if you come down to our facility, come see what we do, the research we do, the important work we do, and then also say that on Saturday we are open to the public for an open house for Earth Day. So everybody can come see what we do.
Great. Well, I certainly hope that folks will avail themselves to that. I certainly will avail myself to the opportunity to come and visit that facility. I do believe in research. I believe we've got to follow where the research goes, but I think the $8 billion currently being spent by the EPA could be spent on far more efficient and effective research. One of those areas would be in our state universities. And when we designed the EPA in the 1970s, we did not have the same level of competence, frankly, and the same level of activity in the research level at our state universities that we have today. I think we could do a lot more to leverage those assets. Andrew, our next caller on the line. Let me go ahead and announce our next ticket. It'll be 564. Will be our next individual asking a question live. But let's go to the phones.
Very good. Yeah, we're going to take a real quick break for traffic. And Jenna Scott, she's got traffic on the 5s.
Dense fog resulting in low visibility. Use caution. Keep your headlights on. Smooth traffic on Highway 90. Blue Angel Parkway still checking in clear. And if you do come across any other problems on the road, just give me a call on the traffic hotline 2626111. This traffic report brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on your car insurance. What does it mean when Geico says you can save just 15% or 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance? It means you probably should have gone to geico.com 15 minutes ago. I'm Jenna Scott, and I'll have your next traffic update at 7:05, News Radio 1620, now on FM at 92.3.
All right, we're back live here at the beach, Casino Beach, for Open Gaetz Day. Representative Matt Gaetz is taking your questions. You can text them or call them 437-1620. The broadcast brought to you in part by Pensacola Beach Gulf Pier today. Matt, a question that I had put to me yesterday by somebody. We talked about the Navarre Pass and the conflict between the military mission at Eglin, the desire for boaters to have access through the pass out to the Gulf. Somebody recommended, look, here's maybe a halfway solution. Could we not get a Gulf side boat launch created and maybe let the National Park Service, the Gulf Islands National Seashore, maybe let them run it. That might be a way to get boaters out to the Gulf, maybe not through, obviously, but would that be something that you might see proposing?
Yeah, look, I'm always a supporter of infrastructure that allows our citizens to be able to better use and enjoy these great natural resources that we have in Northwest Florida. That strikes me as a potential solution. The concern that the military has expressed is that increased recreational activity out in the Navarre Beach area could potentially be in conflict with some of the high-end testing and training that occurs. And so whether that human activity occurs through a pass or through a boat launch, I think in either circumstance we need to be able to deconflict the military mission with some of the recreational ambitions that we would have that could enhance economic development. That's why the top priority I have for the appropriations process in the upcoming year is to get funding for us to be able to expand the Gulf Test Range and improve the assets there, because if we can better utilize the Gulf Test Range, that does a few things. One, it BRAC-proofs the mission that we already have that occurs over the range. Two, it allows us to attract even more mission because we have enhanced capability. But third, it gives us the flexibility to be able to accommodate a lot more here locally because we'll have more assets at our disposal.
Very good. Matt Gaetz showing his radio personality pro skills. He gets it right before the end of the hour. We'll be back in about 5 minutes with more from the beach. Matt Gaetz and Open Gates Day and your calls.
News Radio 1620 and now on FM at 92.3.
How about 560?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it's 568, yes, yes.
No, we're going to wait. Well, actually, how much time do I got? Okay, well, we got time to do this question. Go ahead, sir. Question or comment?
Is this on?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Hi, Matt. First, I'd like to say that you and probably our mayor, Ashton Mayer, are probably the most courageous public servants I've ever known, ever seen. I want to thank you for your courage and for us citizens here. I do have a question for you. As a 35-year professional working extensively with federal environmental regulations, I concur that the EPA regs are redundant and very expensive on business. Been inside businesses and helped them get out of trouble because of the overreach of the EPA. They're having to report a dozen or so different reports on the same types of components, and it's just expensive and very difficult to comply with. I guess the question is, living in Florida, our governor is not a scientist and meets with scientists on climate, for example, only after weeks of public humiliation. My concern is, what assurances do we have that good science will be applied at the state level to protect our health and environment?
That's a great question. Here's what we got to do. I think as a community and as a society, we need to prioritize the environment. That doesn't necessarily mean prioritizing redundant agencies. It means prioritizing good science. When it comes to climate change, I believe that the climate is changing. I believe that the Earth is warming, and the science seems to be pretty dispositive that human activity contributes to that warming. My bet is that the way to solve climate change or any of the other major environmental challenges we face is going to be through innovation, not through excessive regulation. And if we unlock the potential of innovators, we'd do a lot more. When it comes to your specific question, how do you force governors and state legislators to spend time with scientists? One of the things that I would love to see at the state level is the development of a science committee. We have a science committee at the federal level that holds hearings, takes briefings, brings in experts from around the country, and I think it's a great suggestion with our local legislative delegation that the state of Florida should have a science committee like we have at the federal level, and that creates a forum for that science to be able to be presented, and to the extent that it's irrefutable, I think that it can have a persuasive effect on our policymakers. So I'd like to see that change. Great, thank you very much for being here. Andrew, we close to coming back off break? All right. All right. Yeah, okay. Let's see, I think we've already done that one. How about 554? 554. Yes, ma'am. We're both wearing red today.
We are?
You think that guy out there sweeping his metal detectors found anything this morning? Hey, I can give you the weather forecast. It looks beautiful.
Do you guys want to?
I'm wondering who said there was fog.
It was on my drive.
A live observational weather forecast.
News with Andrew McKay starts right now on News Radio 1620 and now on FM
In Pensacola.
92.3.
So if you're just tuning in, we are live at Pensacola Beach, at Casino Beach. Representative Matt Gaetz is here doing a town hall. We've been doing it live now for about 30 minutes. If you want to listen, you can also follow us on Facebook Live, or you can text in your questions at 437-1620 or call them 437-1620. Matt, I know we've got somebody at the podium ready to ask you another question, but I did want to, we did one question while we were in break, and I think it'd be useful for the people at home to at least hear part of the answer. You made comments about the relationship between human activity, carbon dioxide, and global climate change that I don't think people have maybe heard you say before, and so I want to get you on the record kind of clarifying, following up on that, and then we'll go to the person who's waiting at the microphone.
Sure, we had our prior questioner ask about the impacts of climate change and what do we do at the state level to ensure that our state policymakers interact with the science that can lead us to smarter policy. I believe that climate is changing. The earth is warming. And I believe that human activity makes a contribution to that. Where I may differ from some of the folks on the left end of the political spectrum is that I don't think that you solve the major challenges with our environment with excessive regulation. I think we need more innovation. I think we need to unlock the potential of innovators to be able to find energy solutions that make people more efficient, that can reduce the output of carbon, and ultimately can lead to better stewardship of the environment. Great. Ma'am, go right ahead with your question or comment. Thanks for being here.
My question's in regard to the ACA and some of the changes, the repeal and replace. I have pre-existing conditions. I have a significant heart condition. Thus far, I see my doctor, have medication, do very well, and I work full-time, pay taxes. I also work with mentally ill people. So my question is, will you work to keep pre-existing conditions out of the new bill, or any bill, repeal or replace?
When you say pre-existing conditions, do you mean coverage of pre-existing conditions?
Yes, because my insurance right now covers everything that I need. I'm a productive citizen. I pay taxes. If you take that away, I could potentially die. I could potentially be debilitated, and I would probably most definitely have to be on Social Security disability. I don't want that. But if that happens, that's probably what will happen.
Well, I also want to tackle the portion of your question that deals with mental health. Know that in recent amendments to the proposal to repeal and replace Obamacare, an extra $15 billion has been added to the legislation that we were saving to be able to apply to mental health. In the state of Florida, we are particularly behind. We're 49th in America in the funding of mental health. I think that that has consequences in our criminal justice system, in our healthcare system, in our education system. And so I'm in agreement that more resources for mental health, more research, and then ensuring that those actually get to services are critically important, and I would say wraparound services. As it relates to pre-existing conditions, there is really no serious proposal that's been voted on or worked through committee that hasn't said to insurers, if we are going to avail our market in the United States of America to you, you have to cover pre-existing conditions that exist. Here's the challenge that creates on the cost structure. In no other world in insurance can you cover an event that has already happened. You know, if I don't have car insurance and I get in a car wreck, I can't show up to Geico and say, I'd like you to insure something that has previously happened. You know, after a hurricane, You can't
It's
go.
not a car.
Well, no, I understand. I'm not suggesting you are. I'm just, and I've indicated that the circumstances presented in the legislation would provide the coverage for that which you've described. There is an economic reality for cost that if you simply say, well, I don't want to acknowledge those cost impacts, then that ends up hurting people too. Not cars, not houses, but people, because if costs continue to rise, then you have a circumstance where there's not accessibility
What about Becca?
to the private insurance market. That's what we're seeing now under Obamacare. Rising costs, rising premiums, limited choices. That's why Obamacare is in a death spiral, and it's why the if you look at the actuarial soundness of that program, if you look at the premium increases, it's really devastating our economy, it's devastating our job creators, and I will do everything I can as a member of Congress to repeal Obamacare, and every proposal to do that includes coverage for pre-existing conditions.
Okay, so
But raises the
will
prices.
actively vote for something that you know is going to cause people to die all over the U.S.
No,
including
ma'am.
possibly myself.
Yeah, that's not what I said. I'm going to
That's
vote.
what will happen.
No, I'm going to vote to repeal Obamacare, and I think the evidence is overwhelming that if we focus on the cost structures of healthcare and not just insurance, we'll be able to have better healthcare for people and more choices. What we have now are very few choices, rising costs,
I have
people
quite a
leaving.
few choices.
Well, right now in the exchange for this market, there is but one choice on the Obamacare exchange. So that, one choice gives the power to the insurance companies. That's what Obamacare's done. It's empowered insurance companies. If you look at the profit of the 10 biggest insurance companies before Obamacare, it was $8 billion. You look at the profit for the 10 biggest insurance companies after Obamacare, $17 billion. So this has been a big win for insurers, big problems for employers. We've got job creators in our district
about the
who
people?
can't hire an additional employee because of Obamacare. That's why I'm going to fight to repeal it.
Boo!
Sure.
But I am offended you have compared me to a car.
Well, I didn't do
Yeah,
that. I'm grateful you're here. I was describing the cost structure that exists in insurance. Andrew, what's our next question? And actually, let me...
Call a number. Go ahead,
Sure.
call a number, and I've got a question here for you.
549 will be our next questioner here live.
All right, so
549.
one of the questions that's been brought up is that when it comes to funding for research into cancer, there's enormous funding that goes into funding research for adult forms of cancer, but an incredibly small slice that goes to childhood cancer, something like 4% of all funding. Is that something the federal government would work on? Is that something you would get behind, changing that ratio?
Absolutely. And I believe that the federal government and the state government have a role in cancer research. You look at cancer and its impact on every American family. It's significant, and I absolutely agree that this is a national priority. It is shameful that right now the money we spend on cancer research, only 4% of it goes to pediatric cancer. Pediatric cancer is one of the places where we can move the needle the most and do the most to expand life expectancy and to help people. So that's why I've signed on to legislation that would alter that ratio and ensure more funding for pediatric cancer research. I've joined with Rodney Davis, a Republican from Illinois, who's one of the folks taking the lead on that, and we are fighting to try to get that ratio changed. As a member of the Budget Committee, when we look at the National Institute for Health and the grants that they give, I'll use every bit of the influence I'm able to muster to try to get that ratio changed and more funding for pediatric cancer research. When I was in the state legislature here in Tallahassee, I fought for more funding for cancer research, and we got it, and we made sure that that research was peer-reviewed. Research is not an area that is immune from special interest influence. And one of the things that I found is that you had some special interests with some real slick lobbyists who are getting funding earmarked for cancer research, but that research wasn't really being peer-reviewed. And that's not the way to do science. So we need to make sure that the research is peer-reviewed, that an adequate amount of that is going to pediatric cancer, and I think that is an important national priority that I'm fighting for and will continue to fight for. Do we have 549 here? All right. Andrew, let me read another number here, and then we'll go back to the phone lines. How about 560?
We have 549.
Okay. We have 549? Okay, why don't we go to the phones while this lady's stepping up?
437-1620. Another listener asks the question, would you support universal national service for 18-year-olds as an exchange or a trade-off for free college or any other benefits?
Sounds like a good idea. I haven't thought about it much, Andrew, but when you look at some of the recruiting goals that we're missing in various elements of national service, I think that's important. There's a model here that we can follow, and we actually did this in Florida with dentistry. We had a variety of communities throughout Florida where there was no dentist. You'd have to drive an hour to see a dentist, and what that meant was that we were having children with tooth abscesses that were chronic and getting into the bloodstream. So what we said is that if you're a dental student and you got a lot of debt, we as a state will help you retire that debt if you're willing to go and practice in an underserved community. And so we got people out into the communities from our great colleges and universities serving these underserved areas. And then what we found years later is that a lot of these dental students and young dentists stayed in those communities and continue to care for them. So there is actually a model that works to say that if you're willing to do something for the benefit of the public, we'll help you retire student debt, and it ends up being a win-win for everyone. Ma'am, go right ahead with your question or comment.
Yes, I just wanted to say my father died of silicosis. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's from sandblasting. And I don't believe Trump's budget increases our country's security at home. He's proposing harsh cuts to worker safety standards, chemical safety, the cleanup of toxic waste sites, and the folks who protect our clean air and water. Can you guarantee you won't vote for a budget that undermines the health and safety standards and environmental regulations that protect all Americans?
Well, I would reject the premise of the question that that's what the budget does. I think what the budget does is it repositions resources and it modernizes our regulatory conduct to the modern era that we face. And so I guess I would disagree that that's what this budget does.
My dad was killed by Dow Chemical. Dow Chemical did not protect its workers. They knew that this was harmful to my father, and they knew the protections that we had. The only thing that forced them to do what they needed to do for later generations was regulations. People do not regulate them, or corporations. Corporations aren't people. Corporations do not regulate themselves. They do not have to workers are us. They don't keep our air clean. They don't keep our water clean. The only way to keep corporations in check is through regulations.
That's right.
No one is suggesting that you leave anyone to their own devices, but I think that how we have to address the question is by looking at how to right-size regulations. And I think that that's what the president's budget does, and I intend to support it. Andrew, do we have another question?
Draw a number, and we'll
okay,
take
sure.
Traffic here. Go ahead.
552.
So what we're getting ready for that is 7:16 here on News Radio 1620 and FM 92.3. I'm Andrew McKay. It's the Pensacola Morning News live at Pensacola Beach, Casino Beach. We're right at the beach ball. There's still a few minutes left. If you want to text in your question, 437-1620. Congressman Matt Gaetz is taking them. This broadcast brought to you in part by Indoor Shooting Range, Pensacola Indoor Shooting Range. Jenna Scott has traffic on the 5s.
Dense fog resulting in low visibility. Use caution and keep your headlights on. We're in a fog advisory until 10. Smooth traffic on Davis Highway and Highway 90 looking good. Don't be a Mr. Genius by removing that tree stump yourself. Let Diversified Property Works handle it for you. 850-712-2492. If you do come across any other problems on the road, just give me a call on the traffic hotline 2626111. I'll have your next traffic update at 7:25. I'm Jenna Scott, News Radio 1620, now on FM at 92.3.
We're back live here at Pensacola Beach. Matt, a question that came on Facebook is, do you support the fair tax? Would you support repealing the 16th Amendment income tax so that we don't have both of these operating at the same time?
That is a Pensacola.
The answer to that question is yes. I'm one of the sponsors of the fair tax, and that's because I believe we have a tax code that absolutely discriminates against regular folks for the benefit of special interests. Regular people in my district do not need a 2,000-page tax code. That doesn't work for us. You know who needs a 2,000-page tax code? The special interests who want carve-outs and giveaways. They want to be able to avoid paying taxes if you go and hire 6 left-handed Eskimos. And so if we went to a fair tax system, everybody would be participating. People who are in our country illegally would be participating to a greater extent than they are now. And everyone would have a little skin in the game. when we look at our budget situation and the policies that we need to enact to have vibrant economic growth in this country, we've got to get away from the system that we have now, which tilts everything in favor of those who have special access with lawyers and lobbyists. And I want to get to a fair tax system, and ultimately repealing the 16th Amendment would facilitate that objective and get us to something that is far more equitable than we have today. And Andrew, our next, I recognize the next person at the microphone here, someone who emailed me when I was in Washington, and I had the chance to give him a buzz and chat with him and get advice on legislation. So thanks for being here, sir, live and in person.
Good morning, Matt. Thank you. My name's Tyler Manning. I'm with Flat Out Inshore Charters. And somebody called in earlier and talked about putting a boat ramp into the Gulf. We can look out there at the surf right now and realize that wouldn't be a good idea. It's fairly calm today, and could you imagine launching a recovering boat right now? My question is about our fishery. NOAA's pretty much ruined our fishery for the state of Florida. In 2007, Congress passed the Magnuson-Stevens Reauthorization Act. On NOAA's website, they describe this act. They say, this act is designed to promote market-based management programs, including limited access privilege programs, such as catch shares. And that's what that's how they're managing. By market-based management and limited access. That's what they're doing. Not they're not the actual ecological viability of the fishery, but by its commercial value. A current example of this is gray triggerfish. We've had about 5 months of triggerfish season in the last 3 years for recreational fishermen. The season in 2017 will not open for 1 day. Right now, it is currently being commercially fished. They're harvesting and selling commercial fish in the Gulf right now. What does that mean? That means for you and I to go, we can't go out there and catch one triggerfish. There aren't enough triggerfish for one person to go catch one, but there are enough for commercial fishermen to go out and catch and harvest them until they close the season for them. As we speak right now, there are a local group of fishermen and businessmen headed to Tallahassee. The FWC is having a commission meeting today. They're going to decide the snapper season and discuss a few other fish that are in trouble right now in our state waters. Sheep's head, cobia, that kind of thing. The FWC does a great job of reaching out to fishermen, asking for feedback, input. They take that feedback and they adjust the seasons accordingly. And we brought a lot of fish back from a really distressed state to an abundant state, such as the redfish. We got surveys about redfish 2 years ago. They upped the limit to 2 per person. They asked, what do you think? It was killing redfish, and we all voted to drop it back down to 1. That's a great example of what local accountability and local state management does for the fishery. I'm really concerned about the way the federal government shut down the recreational access to the Gulf. Amberjack season's closed right now. Triggerfish season's closed. Gulf grouper season's closed. Red snapper's closed. We're on 0 days of triggerfish. We might have 9 days of snapper season in federal waters. We don't know what we're going to have for grouper. And amberjack's closed for the rest of the year. So what do we tell the people that are calling us from Birmingham, Atlanta, all over the country wanting to come fish and say, what can we catch? Well,
Mingoes.
And what's that doing to the mingo population?
Well, let me ask you this, Tyler. When it comes to the management of our resource, and look, you live on this resource, and so if the resource is abolished, then you have no employment, you have no job.
Nobody has a greater stake than we do.
So who do you trust to manage the resource?
The FWC.
So a state-based entity, for those who are not familiar with the FWC, do you trust the federal-based NOAA organization or the state-based FWC?
The state FWC.
So that's
Nick Wiley, the director of the FWC, is perfectly capable of managing this along with the rest of the commission.
Well, I am so grateful for this input because it is absolutely the organizing principle of my service that Washington screws up just about everything it touches, and that the more we can get decisions based locally at the state and local level, the better off we're going to be. So I support the state management of the fisheries. I think the Magnuson-Stevens Act ignored science. I think that it placed a lot of value on sort of anecdotal evidence rather than real fish stocks. And what troubles me is this notion that we've now pit commercial fishermen against recreational fishermen. That's inequitable. So I want to see greater balance there. I want to see state management, but I also want a chance to plug another important issue for the fishery, and that is the eradication of the lionfish and the importance of that. For those who haven't heard about this issue, the lionfish is decimating the reef fishing population. This is an invasive species that's been brought out, and they're killing the snapper, killing the grouper, killing the triggerfish. Right now, there is no federal system to manage the explosion of the lionfish population. I am going to be introducing legislation that would allow spear fishermen, if they go and harvest a certain sum of lionfish, to be able to earn extra grouper tags or extra snapper tags. That way we could use the resource to help protect the resource. I think that would make a lot of sense. By the way, we do that in Florida with the FWC, but the federal government hadn't caught on yet.
Right, but we don't need the federal government to do that. If the state takes over the regulations of our Gulf from shore out to 200 miles, that's already in place, and we won't need the federal government to put that program in place.
Right now, there is not support in the Congress to give the state 200 miles worth of jurisdiction. And so in the meantime...
Only for fishing regulations.
Right. Hey, listen, again, you had me at hello. You know, I support state management of the resource, but until we're able to achieve that, I don't want to see the lionfish population explode to the point that it decimates our reefs. But as it relates to the economic impact of the decisions that are made by NOAA and the Gulf Council, know that you have my support. I'll do everything in my power to return the authority to the states, so long as the state of Florida isn't disproportionately negatively impacted based on our participation in the fishery. Tyler, I'll give you the last word.
I don't think we'll be disproportionately impacted if we control our own fishery from shore out to 200 miles. We can get that support. The state of Florida could put together a program to take back the quota or catch shares that were handed out, that were granted to fishermen, who have then turned around and sold them to the highest bidder, and then get them leased back to the fishermen who are trying to make a living down here off of it. If the state owned the catch shares and the quota, the fishermen could lease it straight from the state for a small price. They could fish the waters and sell their fish. The state could make an income off of it to then turn around and reinvest back into the fishery and water issues and quality issues and everything related to the fishery. This business of handing out catch shares and quota and then fishermen selling them all over the country, people in Pennsylvania, Indiana, everywhere are owning these catch shares and turn around and leasing them back to commercial fishermen back here on the Gulf. And they're only making, half of what they should make off of it. So I think it needs to be a state-run program from start to finish.
I agree. Thank you for your comment, Tyler.
All right, man, we need to take a quick traffic break. Matt, why don't you call a number?
571. 571 will be our next number.
When we get back from traffic, we're going to have about 3 minutes left until the bottom of the hour news. Jenna Scott, we're out here live at Pensacola Beach. Matt Gaetz, we get town hall. Just a little bit of time left for that, but then people will be able to go and clean up the beach. There will be trash bags available over to my right afterwards. Jenna, what's the traffic look like this morning?
Dense fog resulting in low visibility. Use caution and keep your headlights on. This is going to continue the fog advisory until 10 o'clock today. Both gates, NES Pensacola, checking in clear. The 3-mile bridge looks good. Gulf Breeze Parkway westbound, slow moving through the National Seashore. It's almost time for Cinco de Moe's, where nothing sucks and everything rocks. Only at Moe's in Pensacola. Welcome to Moe's. If you do come across any other problems on the road, just give me a call on the traffic hotline 2626111. I'll have your next traffic update at 7:35. I'm Jenna Scott, News Radio 1620, now on FM at 92.3.
We're back live at Pensacola Beach, where Congressman Matt Gaetz is taking your questions. This broadcast brought to you in part by American Leak Detection. Like I said, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Matt, we've got somebody at the podium.
We do. I would say to Jenna that I am seeing no fog here on Pensacola Beach. It is a beautiful day. Go right ahead with your question or comment.
Hi, Mr. Gaetz. First of all, I just want to thank you for saying that you support climate change as an issue.
I don't support climate change. I acknowledge climate change.
Very, very good distinction. Thank you. What I should say is thank you for supporting the idea that climate change is an issue. There's a lot of people in Washington right now who don't really seem to hold that belief, so thank you. I'm currently a student who's looking for grad programs. Actually, I studied environmental science as an undergrad, and that's what I'm hoping to do as a graduate student eventually. I have a lot of fear right now because there's a lot of cuts that are being made to programs, to federal programs really. Things like Sea Grant, things like really the EPA Star Fellowship, things that really kind of fund the stuff that I want to do. And back to your idea that you really want to help support universities and help support students like me who want to do this kind of research, I really want to kind of hear from you that you would fight for students like me who think that this is important, and obviously you think it's important too. And I'm hoping that you would vote for things not like the budget that's currently being put out that cuts that funding, that cuts Sea Grant, that cuts the environmental, the EPA Star Fellowship. So how do you kind of reconcile that with your need to want to support students? That budget?
Yeah, I reconcile it by looking at the ways that we've enhanced that funding at the state level. And by the way, thank you for your interest in the environment. But if you look in the state of Florida, there are amazing opportunities right now with the environment and environmental research as a consequence of the passage of Amendment 1. Amendment 1 passed, and now tens of millions of dollars every year have to, according to the Florida Constitution, have to be reinvested into the environment. So we're doing a lot of work in the state of Florida with the Everglades, for example, to reinvest that money into habitat restoration, into water flow enhancement in the Everglades. And there's a lot of science that's pertinent to the decisions that we make on, which infrastructure project, which canal do we need to reposition, which habitat presents a better opportunity for different types of species. I'm particularly involved with the panther, the Florida panther, and that diminishing population. So I would, honestly, career advice for you here at our town hall, I wouldn't be looking for employment with the federal government because I think we're moving away from that system. I would be looking for opportunities in the state of Florida with all that we have, with the Everglades, with our habitat, and with the research institutions we have. My hope is that enhanced funding that we've provided will create those opportunities. Great, thank you so much for being here.
All right, Matt, we are just about out of time. We're about 1 minute away from the end of the show. I wanted to give you a chance to maybe tell people why you're out here today at the beach, and of course you're going to go see Wahoo and a lot of other events this afternoon.
Yes, well, Andrew, first of all, would everyone give a big round of applause to 1620, Newstalk 1620, the great folks who've been our hosts and made sure that we've been able to chat with folks all over the district. I want to thank our listeners for the hardy folks who joined us here this morning, and know that I believe this is the essential role of a congressman, to be in the community, willing to take questions, willing to take criticism. That's what we'll be doing all day today in Pensacola. And from every corner of the district, as long as I'm your congressman, we'll be holding open Gaetz days in all of our communities to get feedback, to get advice and counsel. And it's your advice, your criticisms, and your suggestions that'll make me a better congressman for you. So thank you all so much. Thanks for being here. Thanks to Newstalk 1620.
All right, that's Congressman Matt Gaetz just wrapping up the